Welcome to Ideas in Action, a television series about ideas and their consequences. I'm Jim Glassman. This week, could the real key to fixing America's schools be principals, not teachers? It's no secret America's public education system is failing many kids. Most plans for education reform focus on improving teacher performance in the classroom. But one area that isn't getting much attention is the role of school principals. Education reformers are now catching on to what might prove a promising approach, training principals in management techniques that work in the private sector. Joining me to explore this topic are James Guthrie, Senior Fellow and Director of Education Policy Studies at the Bush Institute; Dan Elsener, President of Marian University in Indianapolis. Marian is launching a Turnaround Leadership Academy at its School of Education. It's designed to identify, recruit, and train leaders to transform underperforming schools. And Len Stevens, Principal of Huffman Elementary in Plano, Texas. The topic this week, the principal factor, the role of leadership in turning around America's schools. This is Ideas in Action.
Funding for Ideas in Action is provided by Investors Business Daily. Every stock market cycle is led by America's never-ending stream of innovative new companies and inventions. Investors Business Daily helps investors find these new leaders as they emerge. More information is available at investors.com.
Across the country, school systems are experimenting with new programs to help find, train, and support school principals. The goal is to teach them skills that will help them rapidly improve failing schools. Based on a concept called turnaround leadership, these programs use a defined set of management tools that have worked in business, the military, and other settings. It's an idea that is gaining momentum in education reform circles and within the U.S. Department of Education. It is also the major focus of a new education reform initiative being developed at the Bush Institute. Jim, you lead that initiative. Why principals?
Good question. There's so many answers, but let me start with this one. Virtually every informed human knows that leadership matters. And school leadership, by definition, has got to matter too, and yet it has been badly neglected, as you initially noted. But in more than that, what is clear is that most all of the education reforms come through the principal. They don't go through Mrs. Jones in the math class. Some do, but most of them depend crucially on an able and committed principal. Now, additionally, teachers will say, what I really want is a good principal. If I can work for a good principal, that's what I want. We took that into account. And then finally, we get to the economists and the econometricians who have squeezed it long enough to determine the obvious, that after good teachers, good principals make the biggest difference of all those things we can do inside a school.
And Dan, at Marian University, you've had an education school for a long time that trains teachers. Now you've developed a Turnaround Leadership Institute for principals. What made you concentrate on principals?
A couple things. One is interesting, as a university president, I came up as teacher, principal, and a superintendent, and I learned a few things along the way. I learned a lot after I knew everything, frankly, but at each stage. But it was my work on the State Board of Education. I'm also served there. And it's very clear to me that even good teachers under an average principal or a subpar leadership cannot have an excellent school. It just won't happen. As a superintendent, I had 71 schools, and probably the nights I didn't sleep is when one of them would resign, because I knew the candidates weren't going to be the caliber of here, Lynn and others, and I thought, well, this is going to be difficult. So it's a critical piece. As a practitioner, I can tell you it's a critical piece. It's a critical piece from policy, and we just have to get better at it.
And Len, as Dan said, you are a principal.
Yes, sir.
And you took over an elementary school in Plano, Texas that was having a lot of problems. What were some of the problems?
Some of the problems, the main problem was the parents had lost trust in the fact that the school could educate their children effectively. We had teachers that wanted to be successful, really had their hearts in the right place with the kids, but didn't necessarily have the knowledge to utilize the resources. They didn't necessarily have a focus. Failing test grades, discipline problems are on the rise, things of that nature.
And you were able to turn around this school very quickly. I know you're quite modest, but that's the truth.
Yes, sir.
How did you do it?
The first thing I did was went in with the vision of that we can educate all the children effectively despite of their background experiences. And I went out to the community. I met with the homeowners associations. I met with real estate agents. I met with the businesses and kind of sold my vision of a plan on what we could do to make Huffman Elementary School very successful. I was also able to, with the support of the school district and my wonderful superintendent, Dr. Otto, was able to bring over 5 teachers with me that had bought into my vision, and I could put them in the leadership roles at the school so they could teach the other teachers who wanted to be effective educators what they needed to do to differentiate the instruction. And our main focus was differentiation and growth of the students, not test scores.
You know, you mentioned Lynn mentioned bringing over 5 teachers, and I know that one of the issues that you are confronting, Jim, is the fact that many principals just don't have that kind of authority, and that you could drop Jack Welch into any high school in America, and he, as a former CEO of General Electric, would have a hard time running the school because he doesn't have the ability to bring in 5 teachers, or to fire the bad ones, or to set the salaries of the best ones.
Well, Lynn is extraordinary for a lot of reasons, among which is the fact that he's got a superintendent who understands it. And in this setting, and Lynn was indeed as modest as you proclaimed, Jim, in this setting, what he faced is an influx of a very different kind of student population than the community had been used to. And the parents who lived in the $1 million homes were at risk of fleeing, as I understand it. And he wanted to keep this community together. To have a school sitting there where no one locally uses it was not what he wanted. So that's the emphasis on building back the community support and affection. But along the way, Jim, his superintendent, understanding the dynamics of these things, gives him the authority, one, to bring in leading teachers with him. Secondly, to sift through the others and those that don't fit the new model to undertake their transfer elsewhere. And then he did have, if I understand correctly, Len, you did have some added financial resources, by no means huge. I mean, we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here.
That's
but
correct.
he had some things, Jim, that he could use to lubricate the system and make it work better.
You know, Jim squared, because we have 2 Jims
Yeah, we got
here.
2.
There's a couple the language, I don't know if you picked up here. The subject is the student. Student growth is the outcome. You drive everything to that. And the academy we set up, that's our top motto. The subject is the student. Everything's focused to serve the students. And the student growth is any system you put in, any educational philosophy, testing, always look at instruction, differentiation. As for the matter of, so the philosophy and how you approach this changes everything. As for the matter of freedom to bring teachers and do the things you need to do, frankly, I'm not willing to sit as an educator or a state board member, or just as a citizen, any longer to wait till all the systems get their ducks in order and free up educators to educate. I want to work with the people who are ready to work, and where superintendents and boards want to draw appropriate contracts and conditions with their teachers so they can lead and really serve students, we want to work with them.
And what is
you can't wait for the whole system to change.
What does that mean specifically? In other words, if there were a few kinds of authorities that principals need to have, what would they be?
The few kinds of authorities, first of all, you have to make sure that the process for holding, I believe in nurturing, teaching, mentoring, supporting, affirming teachers, but they also are, at the end of the day, to be held accountable for how they serve their students and advance their growth. And the principal has to have authority when that process breaks down and you have an unwilling partner and a teacher are unable, that you counsel them into a new profession, because the system is not there for the adults. The subject is the student. And so when systems that have over-encumbered and put every roadblock in the world in front of principals to lead, things have to change.
I call that, let us do what we do, and let us do what we know how to do well, which is educate the kids and put everything else out that's not important to that piece of it aside.
You talked about this term, and Dan mentioned it also, differentiation. What does that mean?
It means taking the child where they're at their level and growing them from there. And a master teacher can easily do that with 2 or 3 or even 4 different groups of levels of learning in their classroom.
Lynn mentioned all this relationship with the community itself. And I know that you have talked about the fact that the pool from which principals are chosen is essentially teachers. And teachers may be very good at relating to students, and that's tremendously important, but principals have other constituencies. Is there a problem with the pool, the talent pool from which principals are drawn?
One of the things the Bush Institute initiative is eager to have happen is to augment or supplement or expand the pool of talent from which potential school leaders come. And Dan's university is leading the way here in its relationship with an organization such as Teach for America or New Teachers for New Schools, which has a whole different stream of talent coming into it than one would conventionally find.
Mm-hmm. We can even, to that point, I'm on the state board in Indiana, and we have, working with our state superintendent governor, relaxed the requirements. So you can even bring talent in from other endeavors, and they'll go through our academy to help participate in school administration in the state of Indiana. We just think it enriches the talent pool. We also, in training the principals, we're going to use more corporate leadership development programs, people very much outside of the schools of education. Our School of Education is involved, but our academy is a unique structure. It's not under one school. So the School of Business and these different schools will be involved, and leaders, national faculty and leaders from the community will be involved. So we're trying to broaden the perspective, not just out of a school of education, not just teacher that have been in 6, 10 years teacher. And we think this intermixing will help everybody involved in the process.
And has that been a problem? That it's essentially been education schools that have trained principals, but you're bringing in business schools.
Right.
I know that the Bush Institute program will also be taking advantage of business schools, as well as learning from military even, and from other areas of leadership.
Absolutely. But Dan has pioneered many of these things, he and his ed school. We are learning. There are particular things that business schools do very well. Now, they don't do everything well that applies to education, but things like strategic planning, resource management, human resource management, metrics, measurement, those are some of the things from which we can draw productively from a business school.
Just, Len, if you could tell us a little bit more about how you changed what was going on at Huffman Elementary.
Okay. What other resources did I have to my disposal?
Yeah.
Well,
how did you succeed?
A lot of it was with the support of my superintendent in the school district. I had the authority to go in, and I had some leeway that some other schools did not have.
And what about the union situation?
Well, we don't have a union. We have a teachers union, but it's not a strong union.
Could you imagine having done what you did in a state that has a strong union?
I think so, because I think it may have been more challenging, but I think when parents are crying out for something for their kids, you have to listen, and you have to do right for the kids. So we were able, again, to bring in those teachers. I was able to interview all the existing staff members, and the district reassigned teachers that I didn't feel were going to support my vision or be able to pull off the task at hand. And I was able to bring in folks to replace them. I had a full curriculum audit, was given all the resources we felt we needed to be effective with differentiation in the school. I was given funding for after-school tutoring, for buses to take the kids back to the homes that did not live in the community. That was huge. We had lower class ratios in kindergarten, first and second grade. The state mandates 22-to-1. We had 18-to-1 ratios. All sorts of technology and software support.
Did that make a big difference, the fact 18-to-1 versus 22-to-1?
We found that over the years, it made a difference in kindergarten, because for many of those kids, that was their first exposure to school, in a school setting, in a classroom structure. Really, that doesn't make a big difference. Again, 18 kids, 22 kids, not a big difference.
And I would say this, what great leaders do. Great leaders are put in impossible situations every day, and all of a sudden it's possible. Things happen. And it happens in every endeavor. You see it in business, you see it in government, etc. Whatever situation you go in, if you can get a group of adults around a clear sight of where you're trying to take these folks and focus on the real mission and the real objective, these students, and their learning growth, and keep focus on it and give them systems. The power of statistical analysis is one of our big themes in school. But that's what great leaders do. They motivate, they can articulate this vision, and people start glumming onto it and make that the main thing.
You know, I mean, it sounds to me like what Dan is describing is that a principal, that is to say a school leader, is not much different from a leader in any other walk of life.
With one exception, I concur with that. We're just seeing that from the military to business, actually even in the ministry and in religion, leadership matters. Now, Dan keeps coming back, and I'm so in favor of it, with the fact that for these schools to work, they've got to be built for the benefit of children. Now, in much of the United States, not everywhere, I don't want to make a blanket condemnation, but in much of the United States, the schools are run for the adults, not for children. I mean, that's what you're trying to cut through.
When you say adults, you mean for the teachers?
Well, it's not just the teachers in a sense. It's frequently their leaders, their own union leaders, are more at odds with the teachers who actually work in the schools. But there's a whole set of constituencies that don't really favor children. Those include vendors, for example. Those are political officials who interfere with the operation of the school and lose sight of the fact it's the education of children. That's what he's trying to cut through.
Do you think that leaders, school leaders, can be trained, or is it a question of natural ability?
I think it's a combination. A little bit is from within. It's an intuitive sense. It's for what your calling is or your mission is. It's your belief system that it can be done. But I also think it can be trained through the use of modules, through scenarios.
Lynn and I just met in person today when we were in the back room preparing, and I asked him about how he got into Prince. He said, I've wanted to be a principal my whole life. It's my calling. That's what I want to do. That's my mission. And I knew right then, can you come back to Indianapolis with us somehow? He could teach in our institute. But absolutely no. There's power, there's understanding of statistical analysis. If you're going to work on student growth, you need to know systems, you need leadership skills, planning, strategic and otherwise. How do you build culture of excellence? In some places you walk in and it's a serious business, loving community, but serious business we're undertaking here, and it's been established. And you can develop that.
Is we can teach people how to do much of this.
Much of this.
And is that what you're attempting to do?
It is, and we're not just doing it through classrooms. We don't have anything against classrooms, but that's not where you learn the core of what Len knows how to do. The core of it comes from the experience, from the clinical opportunity to be with another great principal, joined at the hip as that person, he or she, moves through the day, moves through the school year. That's where you see how it all comes together.
So having a mentor.
A mentor is terrific. There's another part of it, I know these gentlemen would concur. Inside, as a principal, you need a set of beliefs, some moral, yes, that's fine, but you need a set of beliefs about people, about children, and about process that enable you to make decisions as they come at you in the rapid-fire manner you describe them. They're just, I know, I was a principal, but Len, I'm sure, was a better one, but I know in the course of just my morning as a principal, I probably had on the order of magnitude of 250 decisions to make that morning.
Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is that the training system as it is now really doesn't help principals do that.
Bingo. There's look, there's some great classroom teachers. You've had them, I've had, we've all had these terrific professors, absolutely. But sitting in a classroom is not going to prepare you for the irate parent, the drug deal, the kid with the knife, the teacher who can't figure out where her lunch is. And it just keeps coming at you. That was all in 10 seconds.
Yeah,
the next 10 seconds got a whole nother remit.
I learned a lot from the medical profession. We're starting a medical school at our university. And the medical doctor medical training and deans of education, medical schools would not think of putting a physician out there that hasn't had 2 years of a lot of hands-on learning. And when I think about a residency for educators, and especially for principals, and our program is a 3-year program. First year is heavily classroom, distance learning, outside lectures. Then for 2 years, they do a residency in a school. Can you imagine learning from someone who's actually done it? And Lynn's probably, if you're like me, I have enough mistakes to teach from.
Sure.
Before you in leadership. And
That's right.
we're letting people get certificates in schools with maybe a little leadership project that they throw in their 36 hours or whatever their master's degree.
Len, some teachers feel that they're being left out of the overall reform discussion. I mean, not only the discussion that we're having here today about the importance of principles, but of reform in general. Do you hear similar kinds of complaints?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the teachers are the soldiers in the field. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that know what works, and they're the ones that know what they need to do to make it work in education. Yet very seldom do the legislators ask their opinion, or do they sit on any committees that have anything to do with educational reform.
So is there a way, Jim, for teachers' voices to be heard, or how important do you think that is?
2 dimensions to this. A good principal knows intuitively and through experience that unless he or she engages the teachers, forget it. You just don't try. So at the school level, teachers are crucial and good principals know it. There's a little bit of a misperception here. I agree with Len that it's seldom that a state legislator turns to a teacher and says, "What do you think?" But the highest spending registered lobby for the nation and each state is the teacher unions. They spend more than any other registered lobby in these things. Their voice, Jim, gets heard, but it is not, one, you have to wonder the extent to which they represent classroom teachers, that's a question. But second, their influence there is about things like salaries and working hours. It's not about instruction. That's right. And that's where Mrs. Jones, the 3rd grade teacher, is left out. No one's listening to her, except a good principal, no one's listening to her voice about instruction.
Just as a last question for all of you, what do you all expect and hope to see from the kinds of school innovation that we've been talking about today? I mean, 10 years from now, will schools be better as a result of the efforts that you're putting into leadership, or is this going to be something that's going to take 50 years?
The public's got to understand that to operate a school is a very complicated, difficult thing, and you need terrific people to do that. You cannot just dip into somebody who failed as a teacher or who failed in business or somewhere and let them take it over. This takes talent.
What do you think about the future, Len? I mean, how optimistic are you that things can change on the leadership front?
In terms of the leadership,
yeah.
I liken it to the turnaround school situation. We've identified what's wrong. We've identified what works. We know what the second biggest effect on student success is, and that's leadership at the school. So we've identified it, and so I'm hopeful that within 3 to 5 years, it'll really take hold in what we're trying to do with the Bush Institute and what you're trying to do in Indiana.
And the biggest effect is from teachers, but teachers are themselves affected by principals.
By principals, absolutely.
Put in the system.
Dan.
I think it's a matter of how much courage we have as a nation, and we'll be knowledgeable. We're kidding ourselves. Internationally, this is an international economy. It's a very different milieu than maybe we grew up in, where we were isolated. We are not going to live off a luxurious fat of the land type situation. We're going to have to get more serious in our culture about the discipline and the practice of learning, supporting teachers, putting excellent leaders. Teachers deserve an excellent leader. And our students absolutely deserve an excellent leader. And we're going to have to do this, but we'll have to have courage to change some assumptions that we've taken to the table about the need and how we ought to commit and organize our lives around education, values, commitment, discipline. And we're just going to have courage, though. And the longer we avoid the tough decisions and be willing to rearrange some systems that we've had in the past, the longer it'll take and the more it'll cost us in a lot of ways, almost immeasurable, way beyond money.
Jim, just as a final point, you started this program really just the beginning of this year, and yet you've already gotten a lot of interest from around the country, and people were already starting in on this, like Marian University. But could you just give us an idea of where you're seeing this kind of reform spirit and leadership?
Yes. There are approximately 10, maybe 12 innovative sites presently. We can't take credit for all of them. There are others who were engaged with this, including Marion, who was out of the starting gate very fast. Jim, I would anticipate within the next 2 years we should have something on the order of 20 to 25 of these innovative sites throughout the United States, and then in weaving them together into an important compact or network is good.
By the way, you talk about compact, it's called the EOS Compact. What does EOS stand for?
EOS is not an acronym, which is difficult for a lot of people to swallow. EOS is Greek for dawn.
Well, good. That's a good place to end it. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Len, and thank you, Dan.
Yeah, very much.
Thank you.
And before we go, I want to remind viewers that you can catch Ideas in Action whenever and wherever you choose. To watch complete shows, just go to our website, ideasinactiontv.com, or download a podcast from the iTunes Store. And that's it for this week's Ideas in Action. I'm Jim Glassman. Thanks for watching.
For more information, visit us at ideasinactiontv.com. Funding for Ideas in Action is provided by Investors Business Daily. Every stock market cycle is led by America's never-ending stream of innovative new companies and inventions. Investors Business Daily helps investors find these new leaders as they emerge. More information is available at investors.com. This program is a production of Grace Creek Media and the George W. Bush Institute, which are solely responsible for its content.